Listen to the yes or no question Senator Dick Durbin asked on December 11, 2025 at 2:37 p.m. that trapped FBI Director Kash Patel into 62-second confession, destroying his career. Did Dan Bongino pass his polygraph examination? Yes or no? During Senate Judiciary Committee hearing before Congress, Dick Durbin from Illinois deployed perfect prosecutorial trap using ProPublica investigation documents proving FBI Director Kash Patel had granted polygraph waiver to Dan Bongino, former Secret Service agent turned conservative podcaster turned FBI Deputy Director. Despite Bongino receiving disqualifying alert showing deception on questions about foreign contacts and undisclosed financial relationships documented as legal evidence, Kash Patel didn't expect Dick Durbin would possess November 3, 2025 FBI internal memorandum from Chief Security Officer detailing that Dan Bongino's polygraph results indicated deception on multiple questions and examining polygrapher recommended immediate termination of security clearance process, yet Patel personally signed waiver giving Bongino access to President's daily brief, CIA operations, NSA intercepts for 6 months, July-December 2025, while simultaneously ordering loyalty polygraph tests for dozens of career FBI agents, asking, "Have you ever said anything negative about Director Kash Patel?" What did Dick Durbin's 62-second trap reveal about systematic double standard, where Trump loyalists exempted from security protocols, while career professionals subjected to political loyalty tests? Why did Kash Patel finally admit yes under oath when cornered by binary question with no bureaucratic escape? And how did Dan Bongino's resignation 72 hours later confirm national security breach exposed as legal evidence before Congress, proving FBI director compromised America's most classified intelligence to protect political ally? December 11, 2025, 2:34 p.m. Hart Senate Office Building, Room 216. Senate Judiciary Committee chamber carried suffocating tension before institutional collapse. FBI Director Kash Patel sat at witness table, Navy suit pressed sharp, FBI badge gleaming under television lights, expression carefully controlled revealing nothing. He had survived 3 brutal hours of questioning about immigration enforcement, counterterrorism priorities, budget allocations. Republican members praised leadership. Democratic members probed controversial decisions, but no one had mentioned scandal that would define his legacy. Dick Durbin, Illinois Democrat chairing Judiciary Committee with quiet authority from decades mastering congressional oversight, sat across from Kash Patel. What FBI director didn't realize, Durbin had spent 6 weeks building traps so perfect, so airtight that no deflection or bureaucratic doublespeak could escape, documented as legal evidence before Congress. At exactly 2:34 p.m., Chairman Durbin recognized himself for questioning. Chamber fell into expectant silence. Political reporters leaned forward in press gallery. C-SPAN cameras zoomed in on both faces. Everyone sensed something significant approaching, though no one predicted explosive 62-second confession that would dominate news cycles for weeks. Director Patel, Dick Durbin began, voice carrying measured calm of someone holding all cards. "I want to ask you about FBI security protocols, specifically regarding polygraph examinations for senior officials with access to classified intelligence." Opening was procedural, almost boring, but trained observers noticed Kash Patel's micro-expression shift at 2:34 p.m. Jaw tightened imperceptibly. Hands, which had rested calmly on witness table throughout 3 hours, suddenly gripped edges with white-knuckled intensity. Tells that Dick Durbin, with decades of prosecutorial questioning, recognized immediately as signs of witness preparing to evade documented as legal evidence. Senator Kash Patel replied carefully. Voice steady but lacking confident authority displayed during earlier questioning. FBI maintains robust security screening processes for all personnel with access to sensitive information. Our protocols meet or exceed standards across intelligence community. Perfectly calibrated evasion, kind of bureaucratic deflection creating plausible deniability while technically avoiding direct lie. Also exact response Dick Durbin had anticipated and prepared to demolish before Congress. Director Patel, Durbin continued at 2:35 p.m., opening folder with theatrical precision suggesting weeks of careful preparation. Let me ask something very specific about those robust protocols you mentioned. He held up document bearing official FBI letterhead. Classification markings, confidential, law enforcement sensitive, clearly visible even from press gallery. Document was real, official, devastating as legal evidence. How many senior FBI officials have received waivers exempting them from standard polygraph examination requirement during your tenure as director? Question hung in air like guillotine blade. Kash Patel's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly. Around chamber, senators and staffers froze mid-motion, recognizing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Senator, Patel stammered at 2:35 p.m., composure beginning fracture. Waiver decisions are made case-by-case basis in consultation with security personnel and are standard administrative. Yes or no, Director? Dick Durbin interrupted, voice sharpening. Have you granted polygraph waivers to senior officials in your administration? Kash Patel took breath, attempting regain control through technical obfuscation. In rare circumstances when security personnel determine that individuals' background and experience provide sufficient basis for confidence in their, I'll take that as yes, Durbin said flatly. He pulled out another document, thicker, more detailed. Let me help you with specifics, Director. According to 4 people familiar with FBI security protocols who spoke with ProPublica, you have granted polygraph waivers to 3 senior officials, Deputy Director Dan Bongino, Congressional Liaison Marshall Yates, and your personal assistant Nicole Rucker. Is that correct? Impact was immediate and devastating at 2:36 p.m. Kash Patel's face flushed from pale to crimson in 3 seconds. Mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. Only barely audible gasp that sensitive chamber microphones picked up and transmitted to millions of viewers documented as legal evidence before Congress. Around chamber, senators and staffers recognized they were witnessing something historic. Dick Durbin had just named names, citing ProPublica investigation Kash Patel had clearly hoped would remain buried in news cycle. But more importantly, he had named Dan Bongino, former Secret Service agent turned conservative podcaster turned FBI deputy director, Trump's personal choice, someone who had spent years calling FBI agents thugs and deep state operatives before being given second highest position in bureau. Senator, Kash Patel finally managed, voice trembling slightly. Personnel matters and security clearance decisions are confidential and cannot be discussed in open session without compromising. Director Patel, Dick Durbin's voice rose with controlled fury as he interrupted. These aren't just personnel matters. These are security protocols that have been in place for 40 years. Protocols designed to ensure that people with access to President's daily brief, CIA operations, NSA intercepts can be trusted with America's most sensitive secrets. And you waived them for your deputy director. Accusation hung in air with devastating clarity. Every person in chamber understood what had been exposed. FBI director had exempted his own deputy, someone with daily access to nation's most classified intelligence, from security screening that every other FBI employee was required to pass, documented as legal evidence. But Dick Durbin wasn't finished building trap. He was about to spring part that would destroy Kash Patel's career in exactly 62 seconds. Director Patel, Durbin said at 2:36 p.m., voice now carrying absolute moral authority. Let me ask you about something else that ProPublica reported, something that will help this committee understand double standard you've created inside FBI. He pulled out another document containing what appeared to be internal FBI communications, classification stamps clearly visible to every camera in room. At same time you were granting polygraph waivers to your inner circle, you were ordering mass polygraph examinations for dozens of FBI agents, not routine security screenings, Director. Loyalty tests. Tests where agents were asked very specific questions. Dick Durbin paused at 2:36 p.m., letting tension build before Congress. Chamber absolutely silent. Have you ever said anything negative about Director Kash Patel? Revelation exploded through room like physical shockwave. Democratic members gasped audibly. Republican members looked at each other in genuine shock. Reporters frantically typing. Kash Patel sat frozen, face completely drained of color, documented as legal evidence. That's the question, Director, Durbin continued. Voice ice cold with prosecutorial precision. Dozens of career FBI agents, people who have served this country for decades, investigated terrorism, dismantled criminal networks, risked their lives in field. You subjected them to polygraph examinations to determine whether they had criticized you personally, while simultaneously exempting your own deputy director from any polygraph examination at all. Hypocrisy was so stark, so undeniable that even Kash Patel's Republican defenders on committee fell silent before Congress. This wasn't partisan politics. This was institutional corruption exposed in real time. At 2:36 p.m. and 45 seconds, exactly 2 minutes into questioning, Dick Durbin deployed trap that would force Kash Patel's confession in precisely 62 seconds, documented as legal evidence. Director Patel, Durbin said, leaning forward with intensity of prosecutor about to spring perfect trap, I'm going to give you opportunity right now to clarify something for American people. Something that will help us understand whether you're running FBI according to law and protocol or whether you're running it as personal loyalty enforcement operation. He held up document, turning it so cameras could capture FBI seal and classification markings. This is internal memorandum from FBI Chief Security Officer dated November 3, 2025. Subject line: Polygraph examination results for senior personnel. It documents that Deputy Director Dan Bongino received what memo calls disqualifying alerts on his initial polygraph examination. Room went completely silent. Disqualifying alert was FBI terminology for failing polygraph, showing deception on critical questions about foreign contacts, criminal activity, or security risks documented as legal evidence before Congress. According to this memo, Dick Durbin continued at 2:37 p.m., voice carrying devastating precision of documented truth. Bongino's polygraph results indicated deception on multiple questions related to unauthorized contacts with foreign nationals and undisclosed financial relationships. Examining polygrapher recommended immediate termination of security clearance process and removal from consideration for any position requiring access to classified information. Kash Patel's hands now visibly trembling on witness table. Lawyers frantically passing notes, but he seemed unable to focus on them. He looked like man who had just realized he'd walked into trap with no escape. But instead of following that recommendation, Durbin said, voice rising slightly, you granted Dan Bongino waiver. You personally signed document exempting him from polygraph requirement. And you gave him access to President's daily brief, CIA operations, NSA intercepts, every single piece of classified intelligence that crosses your desk, despite fact that he showed deception on questions about foreign contacts and financial relationships. Accusation was so damning, so specific, that Kash Patel's entire defense strategy collapsed in real time before Congress. There was no way to spin this, no bureaucratic language that could explain away giving security clearance to someone who had failed examination designed to prevent exactly this kind of security risk, documented as legal evidence. Director Patel, Dick Durbin said at 2:37 p.m. and 15 seconds, voice now carrying weight of institutional betrayal. I'm going to ask you yes or no question, and I want you to think very carefully before answering, because your response will be under oath and will be part of permanent congressional record. Chamber held collective breath. Did Dan Bongino pass his polygraph examination? Yes or no? For 3 seconds timed later by journalists reviewing footage, Kash Patel sat in absolute silence. Mouth opened, closed, opened again. He looked at lawyers, but they had no answer for simple binary question. He looked at Republican members of committee, but even they were avoiding eye contact, understanding this question had no good answer. At 2:37 p.m. and 38 seconds, exactly 62 seconds after Dick Durbin had begun his trap, Kash Patel made confession that would end his career, documented as legal evidence before Congress. I do not have personal knowledge of specific polygraph results, Patel stammered, voice barely above whisper. But waiver was granted based on Deputy Director Bongino's extensive background in federal law enforcement. Director, Dick Durbin interrupted, voice like hammer. That's not what I asked. I asked yes or no question. Did Dan Bongino pass his polygraph examination? Kash Patel took shuddering breath. Face now covered in visible sweat under television lights. Hands gripped witness table so tightly knuckles had turned completely white. Based on information available to me at time, polygraph results were inconclusive and Director Patel. Dick Durbin's voice thundered through chamber. Stop evading. Did he pass or did he fail? At 2:37 p.m. and 56 seconds, Kash Patel said words that would destroy him before Congress. The polygraph examination indicated some areas of concern that warranted further review, but he failed, Durbin stated flatly. Not as question, but as documented fact. Dan Bongino failed his FBI polygraph examination, showed deception on critical security questions, and you gave him waiver anyway. You gave him access to America's most classified intelligence, despite fact that he couldn't pass security screening that every other FBI employee is required to pass. Yes or no, Director? Is that what happened? For exactly 5 seconds, Kash Patel said nothing. Silence was absolute, documented as legal evidence. And then, in voice so quiet that chamber microphones barely picked it up, he said word that would define his legacy before Congress. Yes. Chamber exploded. Democratic members jumped to feet. Republicans looked at each other in genuine shock, recognizing their FBI director had just confessed to one of most serious security breaches in modern FBI history. Reporters frantically filing breaking news alerts. Press gallery erupted into chaos. Within minutes, Patel admitted it, trended worldwide with over 3.2 million tweets. CNN broke into programming. FBI director admits, deputy never passed polygraph. Fox News, despite usual Trump administration support, led with Patel confession rocks Senate hearing. Intelligence community response was swift and damning.